Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Kyle Warner. I'm the director for the North Dakota Aeronautics Commission. If you're unfamiliar with the Aeronautics Commission, we're essentially the state Department of Transportation for aviation in North Dakota. And so I really appreciate all of you taking the time out of your busy schedule. I know it's a Sunday. Coming out and just learning more about airports, airport authorities. I know all of you are very high paid for the positions that you do. And no, I know a lot of you are volunteers. And so the majority of this presentation today is really just to give you some high-level information that, overlooking view of how an airport works in North Dakota, how, what airport authorities can do to really build upon their airports. And at the same time, we don't expect you to know everything, and we're here to help you. The Aeronautics Commission, the FAA, we're here to assist you. But to really build up a community of aviation, it really starts at that local level. And so again, we're here to help you out. We know there's a lot of new faces around the state of North Dakota in aviation. We know there's new faces coming on board, and so we really want to make sure there's good mentorship opportunities for the new airport authority members. And we just want to make sure that everybody understands that there are resources available to you as we move forward. And so again, thank you for coming. I hope you're able to stay for the rest of this conference. There's some really great presentations coming up this week for airports. Just to mention some of them, tomorrow there's going to be information on pavements, PCI study that we do. TSA is giving a presentation. The FAA is going to give a great update on their program. I'm going to present on just the state of North Dakota and what's happening in aviation overall. We're going to be talking about national aviation issues across the country. On Tuesday, the Airport Association of North Dakota is giving updates so you can hear what's going on legislatively up at the North Dakota Capitol. FAA weather cameras, I know that's been a subject of conversation over the last couple of months, and so they're actually here, the FAA weather camera group, and so they're going to be presenting on Tuesday, and they have a booth in the exhibit hall too, so I hope you have an opportunity to talk with them about potential opportunities to install an FAA weather camera on site as well. And open record law presentation, and then roundtables. So there's an opportunity to engage with fellow commercial service airports, fellow general aviation airports moving forward. And this is an annual conference, and so I just want to really encourage airports all around the state to attend this event if you can. It's always the first weekend in March. We really love to have you here. We don't want to mandate it, we don't want to force it, but we want to make sure that it's a fun opportunity to network and that you find value. And so if we're not providing that, please let us know how we can do that moving forward. But I would just love to see at least one member of the airport, every airport in the state, come to this event on an annual basis. And so I really encourage your group to take a look at that moving forward. And so in opening this session, just a couple housekeeping items. We really do have a lot of information that we're going to cover with you today. My staff has been working hard over the last couple of weeks, just what kind of items we want to share with airport authority members. I think we're up to like 100 slides at this point, so we're going to be going kind of quickly through the information. We are recording it, so we may be providing this information online at a later date for airports that were unable to attend. And I know that we've had some bad weather, so there were quite a few individuals I know that were going to attend that were unable to. So we may make that option open later. And so I ask that you hold your questions until the end, because we're going to try to get through all the information. So the slides, we're also going to try to provide the slides at a later date. So don't feel like you have to write down the information. The slides will be provided to all of you at a later date as well. But save your questions until the end. We can always come back to slides and answer questions at that time. Again, we're always able to, we're going to provide you an in-depth overview of some of this information, but we can go more in depth at a later time as needed. And again, we'd love to hear your feedback on the program. And if there's more information that you'd love to hear for future events, we'd love to hear from you what you'd like to hear about. So with that, I'd just love to kick off this session. Again, just to talk about the Aeronautics Commission in general. The North Dakota Aeronautics Commission was established back in 1947. Like I was saying before, we're the State Department of Transportation for aviation. You have the FAA, you have the state, and then the local airport authority boards. So all three of those should be working together to grow and improve aviation throughout the state, in your case, in your local area. But we're here at the state, we're here to help you. We have regulatory functions. We register aircraft, we receive aircraft excise taxes and fuel taxes. We license aerial applicators and aircraft dealers. And in turn, we then provide airport grants back to the communities so we can grow and enhance that airport infrastructure all throughout the state. We're a 5-member commission appointed by the governor. These are our commissioners. Just to make you familiar with them, we have Kyle Heumann, he's our current chair from Mandan, Dr. Kim Kenville out of Grand Forks, Warren Peach Minot, J.B. Lindquist Hettinger, and Steve Blazik in Fargo. That encompasses our 5-member commission. I know most of them will be attending the conference, so if you have an opportunity to visit with them, I really encourage it. These individuals they represent the state well. They really want to learn and hear from you about what difficulties you're having and what opportunities we at the State Aeronautics Commission can continue to do to engage with you to help with those issues. And then I want to introduce our incredible staff at the Aeronautics Commission. We're a small and mighty group of individuals that honestly really care about aviation in the state of North Dakota, and so I'm just absolutely privileged to be working with some incredible individuals. And so in the room, they're all here with us. So Gay Nymiller, put up your hand. She's our administrative officer. She's going to be talking with you later about making sure grant payments are being processed in a timely manner. Janelle Peterson is our licensing specialist. She's the smile when you come into our office at our front desk, and she has become an expert in all the licensing practices that our state works with. Mike McHugh in the back, aviation education coordinator, just does a great job in working with airports and aviation groups around the state to enhance aviation education opportunities. Then we have Adam Dillon right here. He's our experienced airport planner. He's Central and Eastern North Dakota. And then Grant Irwin, our new airport planner, just started with us, was it 3 months ago? You know, so he's looking forward to getting to know a lot of you at this conference. He's learning a lot, and we're excited to throw him into the deep end on all the exciting things that are happening in Western North Dakota, and he's going to do a great job for us moving forward. And just a brief overview of our core agency duties. Obviously, airport infrastructure grant funding, we want to work with all of you on what are the appropriate projects that make sense for your communities and how can we assist in funding those projects. Airport planning support, like I mentioned, we have an airport planning staff in place here. And to kick things off too, Adam and the staff prepared some handouts for everybody. So at this time, I'm going to send them around and just make sure everybody gets some reference materials that we put together for the program as well. And those, we also provide those documents at a later date for those who would like to have them too. But airport planning support, we work with all of you to develop airport layout plans. We conduct airport inspections, so we need to get out to every general aviation airport once every 3 years. If there's airspace analysis concerns, we work with you on those. Airport management support and resources, we're here to help. We also update statewide planning documents, aviation education and promotion, like I discussed earlier, and we actually manage 2 public use airports as well, the Garrison Dam Recreational Air Park and the International Peace Garden Airport. And so these are also lists of agency programs. I'm not necessarily going to get to them in detail here today, but we have a whole laundry list of programs that I encourage you to go on our website and take a look at. If you want to learn more information about them, please stop by our booth, give us a phone call. All these programs are designed to provide assistance to airports in one way, shape, or form. One of our more popular programs is the Automated Weather Observation System Maintenance Program, where we provide funding, 100% funding on the state level for the maintenance of those AWOS throughout the state to ensure that we have good weather for our pilots. And so that's been a really successful program that we started about 10 years ago. And just to give a broad overview, if you're unfamiliar, when I go and I visit high schools or students, the first question I always ask is, how many airports do you think we have in North Dakota? And the answers are all over the map. Some say 2 or 3, some say 300. The real answer is 89. We have 89 public use airports around the state, 8 commercial airports, 81 general aviation airports. And at the Aeronautics Commission, we look at things at a systematic level, and that's how we make decisions with funding around the state. But it's really important to understand that system and how it's funded. So as an airport authority, it's important to understand what your place is within the state of North Dakota system. And so out of our 89 public use airports, we have 54 of them that are eligible to receive federal funding because they're part of the NIPIAS, which is the National Plan of Integrated Airport Systems, which means 35 airports are utilizing state and local funding only. And that being said, there's over 200 private airstrips that also exist within the state. We do not provide public funding to those airports, but we do assist in helping them, just to understand safety requirements and to just provide assistance as needed as well. But for the airport authority members in the room, I think it's important to note that out of those airports, 84 of them are managed by airport authorities, which is absolutely really incredible. Three of the airports, so Williston, Minot, and Bismarck, are actually managed by the city councils. The cities did not form an airport authority to oversee those airports. And 2 airports are managed by us. And so for the most part in our state, airports, well, cities and municipalities have really taken upon themselves to delegate their authority to airport authorities. And that being said, it's important as an airport authority to understand what your functions are or should be in managing that airport. And so what makes an airport successful? You know, I've been privileged to work at the Aeronautics Commission since 2011. I've been at every public use airport in the state during that time frame. And I can really tell you the airports that are successful are the ones that have a very active and passionate airport authority group that really care about their airport and aviation in their community. Those airports have done really well for themselves, and they have taken upon themselves to learn all of the different opportunities at the state level, at the federal level, to really allow us to supplement the work that they're doing at a local level to bring their airport up to be successful. And so, again, what makes an airport successful? Having an airport authority that fully understands the benefits of aviation to their airport and their community and their region. They're knowledgeable about their airport, its operations, and future project requirements. They have a strategic vision for their airport. These members assist in the promotion of the airport everywhere they go. You know, if they're talking with their neighbors, if they're out at coffee, they're always a promoter of the airport. They're helping to educate people that, hey, we do have an airport, it's out there and it's open to the public, it's there for everybody. And you're trying to engage people and have a desire to grow aviation in your community. And they're active within the airport in their community. So a good question to think about is how many times should an airport authority meet? I know some airport authorities might meet twice a year, and maybe it's appropriate for that airport. We're not going to be the ones telling you, what the appropriate amount is. You are the ones that need to determine that. You're the leaders within your community. But I can honestly tell you, if you're only meeting a couple times a year, it's pretty difficult to have that strategic vision for that airport and that community and to grow aviation in the community. So I really encourage you to take a look at, maybe it is more appropriate to meet once a month or once every other month, or more as needed as you get into certain larger projects. But I really encourage you to actually discuss what is the appropriate amount of time we should meet, and it shouldn't be looked upon as a burden. It should be looked upon as an opportunity to grow aviation in your community. And who should the makeup of an airport authority look like? Should all 5 of those members be pilots? I mean, I would say not necessarily. Actually, I would say probably not. If you look back at the creation of the Airport Authority Act, which was created back in the 1970s, I believe, to give the municipalities the authority to create an airport authority, Harold Vavra, the state director at the time, was actually informing different airports of his recommendation for who should be on the airport authority. And it more so came along the lines that 1 or 2 pilots or people who are using the airport, somebody from the city council or county board to represent those municipalities, and then just individuals in the community, like 2 individuals that just understand the benefits of the airport. They understand finances, maybe individuals in the banking community to help move projects along. But having a diverse background of individuals is actually really important when looking at an airport authority, because that gets out of the way of just being one-sided or one-minded in a different area. And that's the whole point of having a board in the first place, is to have different ideas. And who appoints airport authority members? Airport authority members do not appoint airport authority members. That doesn't make any sense. And so please, when you go back to your communities, ensure you have a good relationship with your city or your county. The appointing authority is the one that should be appointing airport authority members. So the airport authority can definitely make recommendations on who are some good candidates. But I really want to make sure that you are aware that the city or the county should be the ones that make the official motion to give that authority to these individuals. And again, it's really important to be transparent and open when you're working in public meetings and you're taking minutes and you're involving your community in your decisions. Those are all really important things that I can guarantee you will make an airport successful. And so just to run through a couple different things about the Airport Authority Act, I believe it was included in your packet. It's really important material that everybody reads. I know it can be boring to look up North Dakota Century Code, but really this document is key to the success that North Dakota has in aviation. So I really encourage you to take a look at that document, because it really tells you what is your authority. Because you were created 30, 40, 50 years ago by the city or the county, some of this stuff can get lost over time by people not actually taking a look at the information. And so take a look at that act, just to cover a couple things from it. Again, a governing body, a municipality can create an airport authority. If a city wants to create an airport authority that is governed by the city, it's underneath the city. Multiple municipalities can create a regional airport authority, so a city and a county could jointly work together to create a regional airport authority. There's a lot of different options on the table. You should be very aware of what kind of authority you're operating underneath. Those municipalities appoint 5 commissioners for 5-year terms, and so you should know what your term is, right? When you started, when you're ending. That should be really important for you to know. And it's also important to know that the creating entity can dissolve said airport authority. And so it's really incredibly important that you're working with the cities and counties, and being very positive and engaging and giving them the information that they need to ensure that you're running the airport appropriately, because at a moment's notice, they theoretically could dissolve the airport authority. And so it's incredibly important to understand that you need to work cohesively with those municipalities in promoting that airport. General powers, not to go through all of these, but you can read these in the airport authority. An airport authority has essentially complete jurisdiction to all matters pertaining to that airport, so you can be sued. It's really important to understand that. So that being said, that just goes to show how important it is, the responsibilities that you have as an airport authority. And so you might want to look at errors and omissions insurance, knowing that. You have the authority to execute contracts, which is obviously important. If you have an engineering firm and you're working on different projects, it's your role to plan, establish, acquire, develop, basically everything that has to do with that airport. You also have authority of eminent domain, which obviously shouldn't be taken lightly. It's not something we want to be able to utilize, but it's incredibly important that you have the ability that if you have a runway extension that's coming down, if you need additional expansion for the public good of developing aviation your area, you have that ability, and that's really important. It's an important power given through the Airport Authority Act. You can establish comprehensive airport zoning regulations. I don't see too many airports doing that. You don't necessarily need to on your current airport property, but it's really important in developing, say, an airport layout plan that you ensure that the buildings that are being built on your airport are following that airport layout plan, that they're not being obstructing airspace. And looking at the land outside of that airport, right? You should be working with the city and the county. They should have a copy of your airport layout plan. You should understand the zoning regulations in your area. You don't necessarily want residential area right off the end of your runway, right? I mean, where do all the complaints come from? When planes are flying off the end of a runway or landing. And so if you're working with the city, you can mitigate that. And so I just really highly encourage all of our airports to fully understand the zoning around the airport, and if it isn't compatible with an airport use, engage the city, engage the county, and work to ensure that it does. And you can accept funds from the Aeronautics Commission and from the federal government. So those are all important things to note about being an airport authority. It's also important to note the municipal cooperation that exists. So there's actually a section in the Airport Authority Act that actually describes how you should be working together with your municipality. You're not meant to just work in your own silo. You're really meant to, the city is charging you because you fully understand that airport. They have a lot more stuff going on here, but if they can give people the ability to really prioritize and build up this airport, that is your job. But then work with them, work with each other, on actually pursuing the interests of that airport, because the municipality can lend or donate money to the authority. They can fund the authority with a mill levy. You need to ensure that all revenues that are provided by the municipality for airport purposes be utilized for airport purposes. They can connect water, sewage, drainage facilities. When you look at this whole list, it's just really important to understand, again, that the airport authority should be working cooperatively with that municipality. One of the things that is important too to separate it in regards to an airport are the roles and responsibilities. When you look at airport management versus an airport sponsor, a lot of our airport managers, particularly at the general aviation airports, are volunteers. And so some of these duties shown up here, performing routine airport inspections, issuing NOTAMs, tracking hazards and deficiencies on the airport and working to improve it. I mean, it's listed under airport management, but this might actually fall on multiple people under the airport board because you're all volunteers in a lot of cases. That all being said, as an airport sponsor, you're the legal controlling authority of the airport. You have the overall responsibility for the planning, development, maintenance, and safe operation of the airport. And so it's your role as an airport authority to give the tools needed for the management side. And sometimes that actually involves you actually taking more of an active role in that airport management side. And that's what it kind of says there at the bottom too, the airport sponsor, that the sponsor is ultimately responsible for ensuring that the airport is in compliance with applicable federal, state, and local safety regulations, requirements, procedures. And so that's a big role. So it's really important to know what those regulations are. And so, as an airport board member, again, you're not required to know everything, and that's why we have a board of 5, and you have resources at the state level, the federal level. You have an airport engineer in a lot of cases. But as if you're newly appointed that position, I guess I would say congratulations. This is really exciting. There's a lot of growth opportunities, a lot of areas within aviation that you can learn to grow within, and these are the areas I think I would recommend that you focus on. Do you understand the benefits of the airport, the economic impact of the airport? Could you go in front of somebody and justify why that airport exists? Those are the things that I think are really important from the get-go. Do you have an airport layout plan? Have you looked at that airport layout plan? Do you understand the future development plans for the airport? Do you understand what land the airport owns, or what land the airport may own in the future? Capital improvement plan. Can you look at the next 10 to 15 to 20 years of that airport and kind of understand currently what the ideas are for that development, or do you have different ideas? Do you have ideas that should be considered in looking at updating that airport capital improvement plan? Do you understand the financial situation of the airport? Do you know what contracts are in place? Do you understand what insurance requirements are in place? And do you have an understanding of all of the grants or financial aid that is available to assist you in building up that airport? When it comes to airfield operations, do you understand what lease agreements are in place? Do you have a minimum standards in place? You may not, but if you do, it'd be obviously important to understand that. Do you know how to issue NOTAMs, or who is responsible for issuing NOTAMs? Fuel operations, wildlife issues, airport security, those are all kind of issues on the side that should be kind of known and discussed as an airport authority. Airport public relations, this is incredibly important. Know who your airport neighbors are. Develop positive relationships with them. Go out into your community. We have plenty of opportunities. Like I said, we actually provide aviation education opportunities, and the goal is the airport is there for the people. Sometimes you have to bring the people out to the airport so they can really see that this is their airport that they can participate in as well. Community events, a lot of us do fly-in, drive-ins. I really encourage you to take a look at that. A lot of times, when you look at your community, you might have a community event that is going on, and you can coincide that with a fly-in. Like Calm, right? You guys have, what do you call that day? It's a Windfest. Yeah, so Windfest, and it's just a community engagement, where people come out, and you guys have a fly-in, that coincides with that special event. So, those are the ones that are really successful. Mandan, they have Buggies and Blues, and on that day, you can also go out to the airport and have a breakfast. And so I really encourage you to take a look at those opportunities and incorporate the airport in those opportunities. Bringing people out for airport tours, developing a fact sheet about your airport. Do you have a website? Do you have social media? Some things to consider in promoting your airport. And we can help you at the Aeronautics Commission. So, again, that's what we're here for. We can help you come up with ideas. We have handouts, that have been developed already. You can go onto our website, and we have this one-stop shop that will be shown you in a later slide where you can click on your airport, and all of these different, publications have already been made in a lot of cases where you can just print it and hand them out to different people. And again, if you don't have your airport layout plan, you can talk to us. Some of you might have a master narrative report, that actually discusses the benefits of an airport already. We have a system plan in place that provides individual information on every airport in the state. And if needed, we can also help you research about historical information. In the past, we've sent Janelle up to state historical archives to find specific information to help airports learn about their history, particularly if you need information to update your SAMS number. That's been a recent thing with the FAA. But we're here to help. And again, it's key to understand the benefits of aviation. I'm not going to go through all the different bullet points here, but which one of these things happen on your airport? You should definitely know that. Same here, Do you have aeromedical flights? Do you have flight instruction, recreational flying? Some airports do have skydiving, so it's really important that you just really understand what the benefits of those are. Every 10 years we do an economic impact of aviation. We last did one in 2015. We're looking at doing another one here in 2024, 2025. But it's a great resource for all of you, and fully understanding how the economic impact is derived is incredibly important, and that it's realistic, that you can walk in a room and you can explain exactly why this makes sense, and why this airport is important. These are the different categories that we derive economic impact from. We actually have a video on our website that explains this in detail, and we're happy to assist as well. Here's an example of the statewide economic impact. And so when I walk in a room and I go up to the Capitol, I say, hey, $1.6 billion of economic impact that our airports have to our state's economy. That's incredibly important. We employ over 12,000 people of a payroll of $500 million. And so it's critically important that we continue to maintain the system, but we can't do it at the state level without you at the local level. Here's an example of some economic impact specifically of Mandan. Again, you can go through each one of those different areas of employment, and it's important to understand what's the difference between direct and indirect. I'm not going to get into this today, but all this information is available on our website. To review some of the local funding options, again, it's critically important as an airport authority to understand how can you raise revenue at a local level. We want you to be as sustainable as possible, and you're going to be most successful in that way. What you don't want to do is put yourself in a situation where you have to lean on the state and federal government for everything. We want to really empower you at the local level to set yourself up for success. And so on the commercial service airport, obviously one of their main revenue sources is the vehicle parking and the passenger facility charges, which is up to $4.50 on every ticket that is purchased. They can also get facility charges for the car rentals. Now, the general aviation airports don't have those opportunities, but there are other opportunities. Land lease revenues. When was the last time you looked at those land lease revenues? Was it 30, 40 years? Have you been adjusting for the CPI index? Inflation has gone up, particularly the last 2 or 3 years. So when it comes to land leases, when it comes to hangar rent for public facilities, it's interesting that people are still being charged $40 a month for hangar rents. And so we really have to work together to, we don't want to push aviation away, but at the same time, an airport should somewhat act like a business as well. And finding the best ways to increase revenue. Fuel flowage fees, airport use agreements, like I was saying before, public hangar rental. There might be opportunities where you can rent out some land, right? Industrial parks for non-aeronautical use activities, if approved by the FAA. So there's a lot of opportunities that an airport authority can definitely look into. And municipality assistance. So you can go to the city or the county to request assistance. I recommend what's really important is if you have a runway that you know is going to be reconstructed in the next 3 to 4 years, it's $3 to $4 million. It's probably not a good idea to show up at the doorstep of that city or county that year to say you need funding. So having a good relationship with them, giving them updates, saying, hey, this project is coming in 3 or 4 years. We already have a financial plan in place. We can leverage state and federal funding, but we really need some additional help on the local side to make sure this happens. We're telling you in advance so you can help prepare for it, right? I mean, that makes the most sense. And we can help you with a lot of those conversations as well. But when you go to the local group, you need to know, hey, there's opportunities where they can provide you funds from the general fund. They can provide you funds from sales taxes. Most airports, are funded through mill levies, right, which is property taxes. So you can levy up to 4 mills from those municipalities. So a good question I would ask you is, do you know, as an airport authority, how many mills you are levying right now? And how many from the city, or how many from the county, right? And if you don't, that'd be something incredibly good to research. And if you're at 1 or 2, maybe you can justify going up to 4. So some things to consider. Something also to note, 2 bienniums ago, we went up to the legislature and we were able to change and update some language to allow airports to levy up to an additional 10 mills. For that to happen, it needs to be voted on by a majority of the residents in your area in a primary or general election. And so the only reason this would make sense is if you have a very high priority project for your airport and the whole community is behind it and you need to find another way to raise funds. That hasn't been used since we put it in there, but it's another option on the table to give airports the ability to raise funds if needed. You also have debt obligation options. We have different bond opportunities in the state. The Bank of North Dakota, last legislative session, this is an incredible opportunity for airports. We established an infrastructure loan program that has fixed 2% loan rate opportunities for public subdivisions all throughout the state, and so airport authorities are qualified to go and get those loans. And so if you're interested in that program or learning more, you can reach out to us, you can reach out to Bank of North Dakota. But as interest rates are now going up, in the current environment we're in, this is a great opportunity in moving forward to potentially bridge the gap on some projects and get locked into a fixed 2% loan rate. Again, I'm not going to spend much time on this to push things forward, but this slide kind of goes through what is a mill. So I really recommend, if you don't know what a mill levy is, to research it a little bit further and to fully understand what it is, because it has impacts on your residents, and you need to be able to justify the mill levies that are coming forward, as you should, as everybody should. If the library is receiving 6 mills, well, that's great, but then the library should be justifying their use of those funds. Same with an airport. So the slide kind of covers that in detail. I encourage you to look at the slide at a later time or do a little bit more research on yourself on what exactly a mill levy is. Airport funding solutions on the federal level. I'm not going to get too into the weeds here. I know the FAA is going to give updates later, but it's really important to understand the basic premises of how federal funding works, that the FAA can provide funding for up to 90% for high priority projects if funding is available. I think we need to continue to educate all people, whether it's at the state capital, at the city, and the county level, that the FAA doesn't fund everything, and they don't fund everything at 90%. I think we need to say they fund everything. They may fund up to 90% of eligible items if funding is available. A lot of our general aviation airports get $150,000 a year in federal entitlements. They can make that up for 4 years. So that's $600,000, and that sounds like a lot of money, but we're looking at runway rehabilitation projects that are anywhere from $1.5 to $2 million. And so, sure, you can get 90% if the funds are available. And so a lot of times we need to be more creative and find state and local funding options to kind of bridge those gaps. And there's a lot of items that are ineligible for federal funds. And so that's why, again, it's critical to have state and local funds to be able to complement those federal funds and move projects forward. There was a recently passed infrastructure bill, the bipartisan infrastructure law, that does create additional opportunities for airports over the next 5 years. And so it's important that you're aware of those funding opportunities if you're not at this time. But some recommendations, we've had a lot of success in working with the FAA over the last couple of years. Very appreciative of all the work with the FAA to bring funding into the state for high priority projects. But how are we successful, right? So these are the 4 bullet points that we've seen at the state level, is that it's important to continually educate, right? As an airport authority, come talk with us at the state and federal level. We need to know, we need to be aware of the high priority needs that you have at the airport. You need to be an advocate of those needs. And then you need to present high priority projects that are justified. Be able to have shovel-ready projects so that you can be ready for funding when it's available. And then also have that ability to partner on funding with your local funds, right? If you have adequate local funds, if you're setting your airport up for success and you follow those guidelines, there's really no reason that we can't work out a compromise on the state and federal level to help complete a project. And again, there's different funding levels at the federal level. At a NIPIAS airport, there's currently general aviation airports are eligible to receive up to $150,000 each year. In that build program that I mentioned previously, it's denoted by classification of airport, which we'll be going through later in the presentation. But it's important to know your specific airport, how much funds they're receiving, both in bill and in entitlements, and how much funding you have and how old those funds are, because after 4 years, those funds can be released, essentially. And so it's really important to know where you're standing in that way. Additional federal funding opportunities are available, discretionary, there's federal supplemental. We compete nationally for those. A lot of times general aviation airports, it's really hard to compete for those projects unless it's a runway, but we can discuss those opportunities. And there's also additional federal funding opportunities available ever since the COVID-19 pandemic hit us. We have CARES, CRISA, ARPA, BILL. I know it can be confusing. I know there's a lot of programs right now. We hear you, we're with you, we're here to help, both us and the ADO office, but it's really important to know how much funding that you have in each one of those categories, and we need to start using those funds. So if you haven't used them, it's really important to get into those programs and to start bringing those funds into your communities. Know your federal program manager. This is incredibly important, so if you as a NIPIAS airport don't know who your program manager is, get to know them. We're privileged here. We got one in the room here, Mark Holzer. Yay. And so it's really important to get to know those program managers. They can really help you, set you up for success in moving forward on federal grants. And now just to go through real briefly some state funding sources. On the state side, how do we fund your projects? Well, we have a special fund, like I spoke about previously. We bring in funds from the aviation fuel tax, 8 cents on the gallon, both in Hunter Low-Lead and Jet A. We have aircraft excise tax, 5% of the purchase price of an aircraft, or 3% of its egg, then aircraft registration fees. So all those funds come into that special fund that we can then disperse back out to our communities in the form of infrastructure grants. We also have received one-time funding with some success we've had up at the Capitol in talking about the needs of our airports. On the special session, we received a $5 million allocation from ARPA funds. In the past, we've had oil impact funds. And most recently, you may have heard of Operation Prairie Dog, where as these different buckets fill up, we have the opportunity to receive some funding from oil revenues that we can then direct to airports as well. And so we have a variety of different funding sources available, but at the end of the day, you know, they're state funds. You apply through our office for consideration of those funds. We have that grant round currently open until middle of April. So if you need any assistance, please reach out to the planners over here on that. Again, a lot of times we look at a 95-5 split, 90% federal, 5% state, 5% local. On all projects, you're encouraged to apply at a 50-50 local rate. So if the federal government can only provide 70% funding, maybe we can do a 15% and 15%. You know, just be talking with us. You can also request up to 90% funding for high priority projects like routine pavement maintenance and AWAS repairs. Over the last 5 to 6 years, we've been trying to get funding out at that high level for airports to really help you out with those different projects. You know, I'm not going to go through this in a lot of detail. Again, you can look at it on the slide later, but this is how the Aeronautics Commission is funded. When you look at the revenue and the expenditure side, I encourage you to take a look if you're interested on how our office is operated. We're fully transparent about everything that we do. We're here to help. And this is the status of oil revenue buckets in the state. Again, like I was saying, as these oil revenues fill throughout a biennium, eventually they get to the Airport Infrastructure Fund, of which then we have the opportunity to receive up to $20 million that we can then allocate back out to airports throughout the year. So this did fill this last December. So this spring, for the first time, we do have additional available funds to provide to airports from this fund. And so we're really excited to work with all of you and continue to plan projects that can continue to update our airports throughout North Dakota. And so with that, I'm going to take myself away from the podium at this time and introduce Gay Niemiller, our Administrative Officer, and she's going to talk with you about some reimbursements on projects.
Okay, so I just wanted to take a few minutes just to go through a little bit of information on how I can get you guys paid. Kyle and Adam and Grant go through a lot of work to get some money for you all, and I get really excited because it's a paycheck that I get to give to you guys, because I will personally never see it myself, but it's still fun to write that big check. So when you guys get to the point of being able to send in for a reimbursement, I think the first thing I have up here, yes, is on the non-federal grants. So this form, I think, is in your pack as well. It's on our website in case you want to make any reference to it. And this is set up for me to reimburse you on, obviously, the non-federal grants. So anything that you've gotten just awarded just from us on any of your projects. For me to reimburse on those, I do need a copy of the invoices, the actual invoices. I'm unable to reimburse off of a statement. And the reason why I can't do that is because the statement doesn't have kind of the broken out information. Usually it gives just the total and doesn't show whether tax has not been paid. And so those are things that I just need to, and for auditors' purposes, I need to have and show as proof of how much it was and that it really truly does go to that project that you were awarded. The other thing I can pay off of is the pay estimate that you would get from I suppose the engineer, the consulting firm that they do for you. And I just review the information. I did mention that, unable to reimburse off of, I said charges on sales tax, I'm sorry. But I'm also unable to reimburse off of what would be like an estimate of services. Lots of times what I see is like if when you guys are looking for some kind of like equipment or SRE equipment or something, then you first get that quote or that that estimate. When that is sent in, they use it for the planning purposes on the award during the grants award but I can't reimburse off of the estimate. So after you actually get the dollar amount, then you can send that to me and I can pay off of that. Sometimes those estimates and those quotes, though, do have the opportunity, I think, for somebody on the board to sign. And so if they sign, and if whoever the retailer is signs that that's the actual dollar amount that you would be paying off of, then I could. I know this seems like a lot, but in other words, kind of, if you can actually get an invoice, is probably better off than an estimate. So going back to just touch a little bit on that sales tax. We don't reimburse on sales tax because we're state government. We are exempt from sales tax. You guys are city or local government, and so you guys are also exempt from sales tax. So if you haven't set that up yet, I know a lot have, but sometimes I've gotten in some invoices to pay off of that actually do have tax on. You can actually file for a tax exempt status and certificate through the Office of the State Tax Commissioner's Office. If you need that information, please feel free to contact me, contact our office, or obviously you can contact the State Commissioner's Office for them to help you. Okay, so then the next one is the reimbursement on federal projects, which speaks for itself. Anything that the FAA has awarded, and we've awarded off of a portion off of their award. So to reimburse off of this, what I need on here is I need the FAA payment that is referenced on the Delphi confirmation sheet. The one thing that I do want to say on when you are submitting for the federal projects and you're giving me that Delphi confirmation, I need the confirmation to show the dollar amount, and I need it to show that it's been either approved or it's actually been paid, and I need that on the same sheet. And I have kind of an example here in a minute of what we were accepting before that we no longer will be accepting. And along with that confirmation from Delphi, I also need a financial summary that needs to accompany the signed request, obviously, and also the Delphi confirmation. And for the most part, I think that actually would come from your consulting firm. Usually when I'm getting something from somebody, it's actually coming from what other firm they're using. When you send in for the Delphi confirmation, it shows on this sheet that you can see that my payment or my invoice has been approved, but nowhere on there does it say the dollar amount that was actually approved. And so this no longer can be submitted, especially on its own, in order for me to reimburse on it. Because the other sheet that would show is this one has the dollar amount on it, but it doesn't say that it was actually paid or it has been actually approved for it. And you'll see I put in the top corner there, that arrow, that is still under the section where you're creating invoices. So this isn't the section where they've actually acknowledged, hey, it has been approved, reviewed and approved, or even paid. So if we go back to this one, this is now what I'm looking for, and this is still on Delphi. What you do is you need to go into, and I have it on the yellow arrows, you go into, back in, to the under the invoices and the view invoices. And then you put in that invoice number, and it will pull up on the bottom, and it will say the dollar amount. And obviously, it also gives the AIP number, so I can match it to what your request is. The dollar amount, and then under the status on this one, it shows paid. But if it hasn't been paid yet and it's just been approved, it will say approved, and that will work for me. And the reason why for that is because even though it hasn't paid, the FAA has approved that they are going to be paying that dollar amount. And I know we've discussed it before, the FAA kind of does the hard work because they require so much information. And so we know that with all the information that they require to go through, if they've approved it, then we're okay. And so that's why I just needed to say approved or paid. And the reason for the changes, we had ran into a couple of payments that had happened off of the two that I had showed you before. We paid this one or this sheet. And what had happened was, because these don't say approved or paid, I have the dollar amount. That was the dollar amount that they had sent to the FAA. Turned around, the FAA had rejected it and didn't pay as much. And so I had already paid our percentage off of that payment. And it's no big deal. You go back and correct it and however you figure off of the next payment or however we need to reimburse from here on out if this happens. But I guess I always feel like if there's really a way that we can try to avoid it, why not? We might as well try to avoid it. So just to let you know that I do try to process at least one batch of grant payments every week. And of course, it depends on workloads, deadlines, any time off or anything. During the summer, sometimes it gets to be a little bit more, depending on how many requests I get, and also probably the dollar amount on it. So I do like to get it out to you as soon as I can. Normally I'm pretty good at communicating my vacation time in advance, and sometimes the unforeseen happens. So usually what we do is we ask that if you have not received your payment within at least 2 weeks from when you submitted it to me, then go ahead and please contact me. Like I said, I try to kind of get out there maybe why I haven't been in the office to pay your request, but sometimes things slip through too. I might miss an email or something in the mail. So it's a good way to communicate, but I usually do ask you to just kind of wait a couple of weeks to contact me. And of course, when you get these requests, feel free to sign and date them, scan and email them to me. You can fax them, you can send them in regular mail. And that was along with the supporting documentation. Again, the invoices, the pay estimates, and anything that would come along with the federal part, the Delphi and all that good stuff. And then my last thing I guess that I just wanted to say are reimbursements are made by ACH deposit only. Almost all of the airports are actually signed up for ACH deposit. There's a few airports that probably haven't gotten any kind of an award in quite a few years that haven't been signed up for it, but we'll cross that road when it happens. One thing I just kind of keep in mind for you guys, if you're going to send a request to me and not that you have to, but if you know that you haven't gotten in a payment in a while, maybe check with me first. The reason for that is OMB's vendor registry program, they will inactivate your account if it's been 3 years since you've received a payment. And it's not that it's difficult to get you reactivated, but I also need to get new paperwork from you again. And so if you kind of think of it at the same time, contact me, we'll get that paperwork filled out, we'll get it sent to them, we'll get you guys reactivated, so that way when you do have that invoice or anything to send me for reimbursement, we can get that out to you right away. And the nice thing then about the ACH deposit also is that it's in your bank account the very next day. So that's kind of nice. Cut off a lot of time than it going through just the mail system. So anyways, that is all I have. Thank you very much. Bye.
Don't know me, Mike McHugh, Aviation Education Coordinator for the Commission. I know quite a few of you out there, and I enjoy the relationship that I get to have with airports. It's kind of, my role is a little unique when I talk to people. Most of our staff, everything is relative to the physical airport itself, whereas my role is trying to get you the people to use your facility, right? Trying to help get more pilots, as well as a number of other kind of educational programs that we have. So one of the things that I helped maintain and worked with Kyle, we helped create a few years ago when we redid our website. If you're not aware, on our homepage of the website and also on there's a tab called Maps up at the top. We have what this we call the one-stop shop. If you want to go find kind of, I don't want to say everything, but most of the stuff that we have about your airport, not like ALPs and stuff, but economic impact plan, or it's pavement, PCI data, that kind of stuff. Just a lot of stuff about your airport. You can go just click on your airport. Gives you a nice little scroll bar here. It's also handy for pilots that are going to your airport. You can see we put the image from the airport directory in there. So it's a place that anyone, you can drive other people. If there's community members that are interested in something about your airport, utilize it. It's there. It's nice and easy to use, and like to encourage you. Like I said, it's a one-stop shop, so it's really easy, kind of everything in one place. But there is a lot more detailed information that is, of course, available. So, and then on our website, we do offer a number of tools for airport managers. So that is located under our airports tab. And then you probably can't see it, but this menu on the left has a lot of tools for airport managers. So if you haven't been to our website, especially if you're new on your board or something, or if you've been there a while and you just haven't refamiliarized, some of the things that we're talking about today, a lot of that's available right here, but there's some really good information in there. So if we look under airport manager tools, for instance, there's some documents in there, ACRP studies, there's some handbooks that are in there. There's a lot of useful tools that you can help kind of your own little professional development on your own, that you could go and just gather a lot of information. There's also information about our AWAS program, some of the other programs that we run within the state. So familiarize yourself with that if you haven't. It's just a really useful tool that's available to you. Another thing that's available under our studies tab is all the different studies that we do. So the economic impact study, the system plan study, the PCI study. Am I missing one? Oh, and then we have one for kind of general aviation statistics. We try to keep that up to date, but about annually we update those statistics. So some useful tools there. Education and programs is kind of my wheelhouse, and so I'll run through those a little bit more in detail here for you. Like was mentioned earlier, I really encourage you to try to get your community to be aware of your airport. And so you can host things like fly-ins if you aren't already. You can join them with community events to try to get better attendance at those. Try to get our youth out there. We're kind of on a positive note. You probably heard a lot about pilot shortage in the recent years here. But if we look at our numbers, we actually have a lot more student pilots. Our number of student pilots is actually growing. So that's quite positive. Maybe on the other side, our number of pilots is not growing at the same rate, staying somewhat stagnant. Now, some of those may be moving out of state, or some of those may be student pilots who don't complete their private. But it's encouraging to see the number of student pilots that we have, and airports can definitely play a role in trying to get more pilots, trying to help that community. Pilots are just one piece. I always like to tell people when we're talking about the aviation industry, if you haven't looked at the data, the mechanic shortage is going to be, if it isn't already, more of an issue than the pilot shortage. And so, that I can tell you. The pilot shortage exists. It's out there. You've probably been canceled on a commercial airline flight as a result of it. But the mechanic shortage is going to be worse. And so anything we can do to try to get young people interested in aviation is a positive. And so some of the different programs that we offer, as you see here, that we can help, FTAP. So FTAP is the Flight Training Assistance Program. I can't remember if I still have a slide, so I'll give you a brief on it. The Flight Training Assistance Program is designed for airports that don't have adequate flight instruction at your airport. So, Cullen was mentioned earlier, they're kind of our great example of FTAP. So what we'll do is we'll help fund an instructor to get to your airport if you don't have adequate flight instruction. The concept here, so we'll pay 75% of those costs. We're asking the airport authority to pick up the other 25%. I can tell you the costs are fairly minimal, typically. But what ends up happening is you build your pilot population up, and eventually you don't need FTAP. So like in the case of Cullen, for instance, they were on FTAP, they're bringing in an instructor from somewhere else. We can help try to find instructors for you, but we kind of rely on you and your network to help find those instructors. But then eventually, hopefully you can get an instructor trained, and then that airport is now doing FTAP for other airports. And so, you build up that local community, and it can actually help other airports. So really good program, a little bit underutilized right now. We don't have a ton of airports utilizing FTAP. Some of that I recognize is because we don't have a lot of flight instructors looking for more jobs. There's enough flying that's out there that we don't have a whole lot of excess flight instructors. So, but that said, we do have that program. It is available. If you can find that instructor, we'd love to work with you on that. We do offer an airport internship program for 8 commercial service airports. Again, we don't have all of them using it every year. but it is available, and we could talk more on the commercial service airports. We can talk more individually on that. The aviation art contest, we just wrapped that up for this year, but that is something that this is an area where we send this out to all the schools, but it's a great way that you and your local community, you and your airport, can help get your community just thinking and interested in aviation. So is somebody drawing a picture of an airplane going to make them be a pilot? Maybe not. But is it going to spark that interest that may turn into a career? Maybe it's as an engineer, maybe it's as maybe it's a pilot, maybe it's a mechanic, but just sparking that interest, getting them thinking about it at a young age. And so we send that out, but if you can help with the promotion, or we've had airports even run like a mini contest in your local community, and maybe the winner from this school gets a free flight from somebody. So there's ways that you guys can help with that. Doesn't really cost a whole lot. It's, you know, we run the state level competition, and then we send the entries on to nationals out in DC. So that's where this year's contest is. They're being judged right now. We send the top 3, there's 3 different age categories, send the top 3 from each one on for national judging. And then of course the winners from national go on to international competition. So it's been a while since we've had a national winner from North Dakota, but we did, I think it was 2011 if I remember right. So not too long ago. Then we do have some high school programs. Going to talk a little bit about that. And then our passport program, which I think I got a slide on here. So to talk a little bit about our high school programs, this has really grown. So for those of you who don't know me and my background, I was a teacher here in Bismarck for about 10 years. I was the only high school aviation teacher in the state. Since then, we now have, as you can see, all these different dots up here. We have a number of communities around the state: Grand Forks, West Fargo, Jamestown, Williston, Minot, all have face-to-face high school programs. We also have distant, and we have Kindred, I think, coming on board, right? Yeah, next year. So Kindred coming on board. And then we also have distance education available. So if you're a small school or a small community and you're like, we can't get an instructor in our school, or we wouldn't have enough kids or that kind of thing, there is 2 different types of distance education that's available. One is through the Center for Distance Ed, which is really an online program. Not to, I don't know, turn your nose at an online program, but from an educational perspective, a purely online program is never going to be as good as a face-to-face program or any time that you can develop a relationship with the instructor. So the kind of hybrid, the joining of that. We also have aviation education available through, it's the Central Region Area Career and Tech Center. The CRACTC is their abbreviation. But they offer distance education statewide. The difference between them and the Center for Distance Ed is they actually have some interaction with the instructor. Maybe over video, but they do bring them in for face-to-face things occasionally. I think this year they're doing like an event in Bismarck and an event in Minot. And so they try to build that relationship a little bit better. In my opinion, it's a step above Center for Distance Ed, but know that there are options available. And we encourage you to work with, if all you have to do sometimes is plant the seed with your school, send them my way and I can help connect the dots if you need help with that. So, but 2 really, really exciting things that happened in the last year that, for what I would call the medium-sized communities, Kindred is a good example of this. So just recently here, in the last month or so, we worked with Career and Tech Ed, who licenses those teachers. So it used to be really, really tough to get, in order to be a licensed teacher to teach aviation in high school, you had to have 8,000 hours of experience. And they would substitute 4,000 hours for 2 years of college. And so you needed at least 4,000 hours of experience. It doesn't have to be flight experience, but it had to be something in the industry. You had to work, and once you've been working for 2, 3, 4 years or more, it may be tough to get some of those people to come out of the industry and go teach high school kids, which may not always be the friendliest, and you may not necessarily make as much as you were making before. So it's a tough sell to try to get someone to come out of industry and come teach in a high school, right? But what we've enabled by working with Career and Tech Ed is the ability to transition from what we call a license, so to be licensed under Career and Tech Ed, to make it an endorsement. And may not mean a whole lot to you right now, but to think about it here, if you have a licensed teacher, someone who's licensed to teach any other subject, could be math, art, it doesn't matter, licensed to teach something, and they have some sort of aviation background, so they may be a pilot, for instance. There's two different routes here. One is on the unmanned aircraft side, so if they have their Part 107 and they're a licensed teacher, they can teach unmanned aircraft, and what that also enables them to do is they can integrate it into other subject areas and still get that career and tech ed credit for it. And again, you're not all in the education side, but from an educator's perspective, that enables them to be eligible for the North Dakota Scholarship through career and tech ed and a number of other factors. So that's the UAS side. On the pilot side, what we call the pilot track, the solution that we have is using AOPA. AOPA has a free curriculum that's available. They give you everything you need, minus the physical materials, which don't cost a whole lot, but they basically give you the whole curriculum for free and give you some professional development. Teachers that have gone through that professional development and use that AOPA curriculum and are a licensed teacher in some other area, many times we're looking at math and science, can now get licensed quite easily through Career and Tech Ed to teach Aviation 1 or unmanned aircraft if they go that route. So again, I'll use Kindred as an example. Ron called me up and said, hey, I've got to, how do we get this in our community? We start talking with the school, we talk about the options, we identify a possible instructor. We got to connect a lot of dots, and in that case, it takes close to 2 years. I mean, it's not something that's going to happen overnight. If I can almost guarantee, if you call me today and say, hey, I want to get this started in my school, it's probably not going to happen next school year. We could try, but it's probably not going to happen next school year. But we need to be working on it now if you want it to happen in the next school year. So it does take a little bit of time for that to happen. Give me a call, we can help make that happen. So, aviation education grants. So this, if you want to do something in your local community, outside of airport improvement type of projects, you want to bring kids in, you want to do a project in your community. Career fairs are a great example. We sponsor some career fairs. Other educational programming, I kind of leave that open because I don't want to say, oh, if you're looking at doing this kind of thing, and then you kind of think that's what I have to do. All sorts of things. We'll help with transportation to get to aviation events. For instance, one of the things we help fund through our educational funds is students attending the Career Expo that the North Dakota Aviation Association puts on. We used to bring a lot of students to this conference here, and we realized that this content may not be directed at high school students, so we tried to make them kind of have their own conference. But we help transportation, we'll help funding for those events. We've helped fund some startup costs for new high school programs, flight simulators. We did a rocketry grant not too long ago. So just a number of different things. We don't have a lot of boundaries on that one. Talk to me and we can see if your project might be eligible. And it might be an idea that you have and I connect with your school. I'm happy to do that for you. You just got to get in touch with me. We also offer some, like let's say you have a fly-in. Pretty common that I'll get requests. We have some balsa gliders that we can send you. So if you think, hey, I'm going to have 100 kids at my fly-in, I'd like some balsa gliders, or these, they're called whirly gigs. They're like a little helicopter thing you put between your hands, they fly up. We can give you those sorts of things. But really cool is this educational brochure that we have that's on the left. We call it the Flight Plan to Aviation in North Dakota. It has just a ton of information in it. A lot of it is North Dakota specific, or we tried to make it North Dakota specific. But it talks about careers in aviation, parts of an airplane, phonetic alphabet. It's something that you could go through. If you have any sort of aviation background, you could go through with some kids and almost have a bunch of mini lessons built right into that. If nothing else, you could give it to kids where they could go home and look at it. So we're happy to provide those to you. We can mail them out. We have some here if you want to take some home with you. The directory, this is a reminder, just so you're aware. We do directory updates every 2 years. So this cycle is a new directory. If you haven't If you don't have new directories at your airport, which you probably don't, because we just printed them, I don't know, a couple weeks ago we got them in, so you probably don't have them. Get some from our booth before you leave today. We don't have any here, I don't think, but get some from our booth before you leave, or let Janelle know, we can get some to you. But try to take some home. It's nice if you could take them home from this conference so we don't have to mail them to you. We could save a little cost. But we're happy to get those out to you. But what I do want you to know is we update those every 2 years, and that's, pilot directory. If you don't have new directories at your airport, which you probably don't, because we just printed them, I don't know, a couple weeks ago we got them in, so you probably don't have them. Get some from our booth before you leave today. We don't have any here, I don't think, but get some from our booth before you leave, or let Janelle know, we can get some to you. But try to take some home. It's nice if you could take them home from this conference so we don't have to mail them to you. We could save a little cost. But we're happy to get those out to you. But what I do want you to know is we update those every 2 years, and that's, pilots do use that to find out, if they're looking at going flying after the storm passes through and they want to know if the runway's been plowed, they need to know who to call. And so that directory is a really handy thing for pilots to be able to get your airport manager's information. There's a variety of pieces of information depending upon your airport. Just kind of important. So if there's things that need to get into that directory, just kind of remember in the back of your mind, every 2 years we need that information, but if you get that to Adam and Grant anytime, it might, for instance, let's say your airport manager changes tomorrow, obviously they should know about that anyway, but let's make sure we get that on our list for directory updates to come. So please contact us anytime that we should update something for your page. The Passport program. Passport program has had a couple of changes here. For the most part, well, for those of you not familiar, the Passport program is I see a number of jackets and shirts around, so you can talk to those guys in the room. We're going to award Passport awards tonight. You can talk to those guys. But essentially, rewards pilots that fly to all the airports in the state. So we have 89 public airports. If you've flown to all 89, you can get yourself a nice leather jacket. We like to say it's free. Some people have told me it's the most expensive free item they've ever received. But 30 airports, you get a shirt. 60, you get a flight bag. 89, you get a leather jacket. So the changes that we have here, the first change I don't think will impact anybody in this room, but just to mention, we have taken 9 of our airports and made them optional. And so you can see the list on here. If you're interested in why, you could talk to the planners. They can give you more information. But essentially, there's issues with each one of those airports that we said, maybe we should consider not requiring a person to fly to that airport. So you're still welcome to. It's still in the program, but it's optional. So really, going forward here, everybody to date has flown to all 89, but going forward, 80 is the number that you'll have to fly to. Just to give you an idea, Richardson, for instance, they're only open a few months of the year. You may or may not have cow pies on your aircraft after you land there. So anyway, each one has one or more issues that were of concern. The second thing, just to kind of be aware of, doesn't impact you, but just so you're aware of, and if you're a pilot, something that you might want to be aware of, we haven't been able to officially launch yet, but it's going to come in the next month here. We are going to have a digital version of the Passport, and that'll be through AOPA. So if you don't already, if you download the AOPA app, AOPA has a digital passport program built in. Ours isn't quite ready to hit the launch button, but we're very, very, very close. Essentially, when you get to an airport, you can log in on your phone and hit the check-in button. It looks at your location and decides whether you're eligible to check in. They're going to add to that. You're going to have to be within, I think it's 1,500 feet of the ground and going less than 20 knots. As a full disclosure, as of today, you could check in from 8,000 feet going 150 knots, and but that's going to be modified. So we're going to be the second state that'll have our state passport program into AOPA's program. Essentially, that data will then come to us. The rest of the program looks identical. But the last thing I'll say about the passport program is we do rely on you guys to try to keep your passport's stamp. We aren't getting rid of the stamps. We do rely on you to try to keep those stamps up to date. Just make sure they have ink and they're in working order. And I'll say, especially in the spring, sometimes those mailboxes get full of snow or something, and they're waterlogged and just not a good situation. And so maybe sometime this spring when it warms up, when I say spring, maybe summer, I don't know, whenever this stuff quits. But check out your stamp. If you need a stamp, let us know. It doesn't take us a whole lot of time, but it takes a little bit of time. We'll get a stamp printed up, mailed out to you. If you need a new mailbox, let us know. Any supplies that you need. We are, for those of you that may be participating, we do send stamps. If somebody calls us and says, hey, I was in Mandan and I couldn't find the stamp, I normally say, well, do you have a picture or logbook entry, something to prove that you were there? We can get them a stamp. But if that stamp is there and in working order, in good shape, we really appreciate it, and we kind of rely on you guys for that. Other than that, we just, we'll do all the work side of it. We'll get you the stamp. We just ask that you put it out. So with that, I don't know if anyone has any quick questions, but I know we'll take questions at the end. So I think I'll turn it over to, I don't know if it's Adam or Grant, one of you guys know. So thanks.
I'm going to focus more on the physical facility part of things. I got a lot of ground to cover and not a lot of time to do it, so we're going to jump right into it. So first of all, airport capital improvement plans. This is really important for airports. It is a document that outlines your financial plan for about the next 10 years. It lists any major projects you may have, major maintenance projects, equipment acquisitions, and so it's a really important document to have. It is required to be filed with the FAA and the state every year as part of the FAA's pre-application process. And that helps us out because then we use that to help program the state CIP. The FAA programs it into their system so that they know when projects are going to come up in the future. And then airports that aren't part of the NIPIAS, they're not federally eligible, they can also really benefit from this as well, just so you have a really good sense of what projects you may need in the future. You might need a new terminal, you might need some heavy maintenance to one of your taxiways, and it's just really good to get that on our radar as well as yours. The CIP is usually put together by the airport's engineer. We've got a few of those folks in the audience today. They'll sit down, they'll talk with you, they'll discuss your priorities, your needs, and they'll come up with a good plan for you. Typical CIP items are runway reconstructions, lighting system upgrades, snow removal equipment, that's an eligible purchase, land acquisition if you're going to do any kind of expansions on a longer runway, new apron. Environmental assessments are usually required as part of those expansions, so that's factored in there as well. Construction of new buildings, hangars, terminals, and et cetera. It's not only identifies what you want to build, but it also comes up with a reasonable timeline for how you want to do it. It can't just pack together millions of dollars worth of stuff year to year to year to year. That's never going to get funded. So it makes you just kind of sit and think about what can reasonably be funded and space out phases as necessary to make those projects successful. CIP meetings are a major part of this process, and so what we do is we try to get together with as many airports as we can every single year, sit down in the same room with everybody, and just kind of hash out what's going on. It's really beneficial from the state and the FAA point of view because it gives us a better understanding of your airfield. If we never met you, if we only encounter you every couple of years when you make a phone call to us, we don't really understand your facility, and that's not good for anybody. But if we sit down once a year, we have a chat, we talk about your needs, what's happening at the airport, that gives us a really well-rounded idea of what's going on at your airport, and it helps just everybody across the board. It also really streamlines projects because sometimes you may have dozens of emails and phone calls to a bunch of different people spaced over days or weeks. It takes a long time to get things resolved. If everybody's just sitting there looking at each other across the table, you can sometimes ask people questions directly. It speeds up the process so much. You may have a 5-minute conversation. They can save everybody a week worth of emails. So that's well worth it. Every year, usually July, August timeframe, we start doing these CIP meetings. We have 4 in-person meeting block days where we do spend the whole day talking to airports. We do Minot, Devils Lake, Bismarck, and Jamestown. The FAA comes to those, and we meet with 6 to 8 airports per day. So it's a marathon session all day long. CIP meetings are streamed digitally, so there's a lot of people that can't come in person. They might be on vacation or a business trip or something, but they can take an hour, call in from their hotel, and they can join in those discussions. That's really beneficial. 23% of our CIP meetings last year were entirely digital, entirely virtual. So everybody just called in online. In 2022, we held meetings with 75% of our NIPIAS airports, including all 8 commercials and 34 non-commercial airports. So we run through a few different quick familiarization topics. We get an update from the airport, ask them what events have taken place there recently. What's your flight training? What's your air traffic? How's your hangar situation? Are you full up? Do you have empty space? And so that gives us a really good sense of your status at your airport and what your needs might be. We look at satellite and aerial imagery, and then we look at your pavement condition index, and I'll get into that later on. Then we sit down and we talk about the CIP itself. That is the meat and potatoes of these meetings. It's the core part, and so we sit down and we walk through year by year. What are you doing in 23? What are you doing in 24, 25? And we also, and we discuss it project by project to see if that timeline makes sense. Maybe we need to break it up a little differently, put in a spacer year to bank a little bit more money, that kind of thing. And we also talk about your available funding sources. So Kyle talked about a bunch of the different federal sources, entitlements and bill and discretionary, and as well as the statewide, the state level funding sources. And so we go through, we evaluate your balances on all those sources of funding and see if you're going to have enough funds, if we bank it up enough, if you're going to have enough to make that project happen, or again, if we need to space it out a little bit more. Then we delve into your immediate projects in the near future. So if you're going to do a big runway rehab project next year, we sit down at that meeting and we look at your project. Your engineer presents the sketches of these projects, and we talk as a group what makes sense and walk through that project step by step and talk about those funding sources and everything else. With everybody, again, as I said, it streamlines everything really well. With everybody in the same room talking to each other directly, it can answer a lot of questions just immediately right there and save a lot of time and effort. We then do a review of state and FAA records. We just want to make sure everything is up to date. We have a recommended project schedule of major deadlines and target dates to make your project successful in the following year. We talk about your 5010 Airport Master Record, which is kind of your airport's birth certificate. It's the core information on your airport that then filters down throughout all the FAA publications. We talk about your based aircraft. That's very important if you're a NIPIAS airport. The state airport directory, which Mike already talked about. We look through our state records on your airport authority contacts, your aerial applicators, your aircraft that are registered with us, and et cetera. And then we look at your open state grants. We see if maybe you have a grant from 3 years ago that you didn't realize you had money left on. And so we want to make sure that you get your funds, and if you don't need those funds, we want to make sure that we can turn those funds back and dedicate them toward a project that needs them. Kyle mentioned SAMs. SAMs expiration has been a big thing. For non-NIPIAS airports, you don't have to worry about it, but for NIPIAS airports, this is a big deal. To get your federal grant money, you have to be registered with SAM.gov, and you have to have an active unique entity identifier, which is kind of like your social security number, except as a government entity. And what that does is it allows you to receive those grants. This has to be renewed annually, and if it is allowed to expire, then you can't get grants. Then you're done, you're cut off. Obviously, that's not desirable. We don't want that to happen to anybody. So we want you to take a look, know what your expiration date is. Your engineers are usually pretty good at keeping up on that, but know it at your airport level too. And then start that renewal process at least a month, if not 2 beforehand. There's been some increasingly strict requirements on those renewals lately, and so we've had some airports that have gone to renew their SAMs. Normally in the past it'd be a process that would take you an hour or 2. They're suddenly discovering they're having to dig through records and find articles of incorporation from 1972. They don't know where that was. That was so many board members ago. The city's lost it. Janelle has to run up to the state archives to dig it up if she can even find it, if that was ever stored by us. So it becomes a mess. So stay on top of it, make sure you get that renewed as soon as possible, and protect your funding. So then we take all those individual statewide capital improvement plans, and as well as the pre-applications for FAA projects, and we integrate them together into a master statewide capital improvement plan for the entire state. Basically, we have this document that outlines every NIPIAS project for the next 10 years, every airport in detail, timing, everything. It's a really helpful document. We put a massive amount of effort into it, but then it allows us to really understand the state at just the whole statewide level. And just for a quick bit of information, over the next 10 years, all our NIPIAS airports alone have over $1 billion worth of needs, and we're trying to plan for all those using federal and state funding. Jumping into airport inspections, myself, airport planner, and Grant, we are your state airport inspectors as well. Mike and Kyle are also qualified inspectors. So we will show up periodically and we will inspect your facility if you're a non-commercial airport. We call this a 5010 airport inspection because it's named for the FAA Form 5010, the Airport Master Record. We are contracted by the FAA, as many states are, to do on a 3-year cycle. We inspect all the non-commercial airports. Our new cycle began last October. We have 81 non-commercial airports, and so we will try to work our way through all those every 3 years. We do about 27 inspections every year. And we did, 27. For your commercial airports, you will be inspected by a federal inspector. You fall under FAR Part 139, which is more strict, and so you will have a much more prolonged visit with a federal inspector once a year. One of our primary things we're looking at is to make sure you have clear approaches. That is really important. We seek for all our airports to have at least a 20-to-1 approach, so for every 20 feet you go out from the runway, go up 1 foot. That allows you to clear an obstacle. That can be a lower angle depending on what your runway is. Some of our bigger non-precision instrument runways has a 34-to-1, and if you're a commercial airport with a precision runway, you're going to have a 50-to-1. So a lot to protect. This is just a quick graphic of how big approach surfaces are. A lot of airports don't realize just how big your approach surfaces are. This is 250 feet wide for just a visual runway. This is the smallest form of approach surface, most common, but it's 250 feet wide. If an object pokes up through those trapezoids at any given point, you have an obstruction. That's a bad thing. So remember, it's not just your straight in right off the end of the runway, it flares off to the sides as well. If you have a non-precision runway, it's 500 feet wide, and if you have a precision instrument runway, if you're commercial, then it's going to be 1,000 feet wide. So it's a lot of land that you have to protect. Keep an eye when you're just doing your normal rounds at your airport. Watch out for any new obstructions. Look out for any new buildings that might be built. We've had a few surprises that have popped up in recent years that nobody talked to the airport or the city and just put things up where they shouldn't. Look out for parked vehicles and equipment. And then vegetation is a big thing. Vegetation, trees and bushes grow real slow. You don't realize that it's a problem. Little bush, 10 years later, is suddenly a tree, and it punches into your approach surface. So you can kind of see that little bush that's on the right, the lower right-hand corner. That one snuck up on somebody, and it had a visit with a chainsaw shortly after this photo was taken. So your approach surfaces are part of FAR Part 77. That's a section of regulations that's dedicated to protecting airspace. These are 2-dimensional areas and 3-dimensional volumes of airspace that have to be clear of obstructions to protect aircraft that are in flight or maneuvering on the ground. Coordination with the FAA is really essential, and it's required under Part 77 to make sure that that will not affect airspace. Part 77 surfaces look like a football stadium. This is LA Coliseum. This is a good example. So the little diagram on the left side is just the FAA diagram, official FAA diagram on how they look. But if you think of a football field, football stadium, the runway is the field itself, your benches, and right off the end zones, those are, that's your primary surface. You got a horizontal surface that surrounds, that's like the lower deck. Conical surface extends up and out. And then you have your approach surfaces that flare out right through the uprights. Now these are actually really big, a lot bigger than most airports realize. This is using the CLUE tool from South Carolina. They have kind of a nifty airspace tool. This is the city of Lawrence, South Carolina, and Lawrence County Airport. You can see a little airstrip there off to the right, not too big, but all their protected airspace, if you overlay the CLUE tool, is the size of the entire city. So your protected airspace is huge, so just keep that in mind. Now, as I said, you need to coordinate with the FAA to make sure that anything that's being built is not going to be an obstruction. It's not going to be hazardous. So engineers, towns, anybody else needs to file a case study with the FAA at oeaaa.faa.gov at least 45 days before a major construction project is to proceed. Now, you know, sometimes there's things that are really short notice that you don't have that kind of time. Air conditioner blows out on a building that's off the end of the runway, and they have to bring in a crane, and they can't wait for 6 weeks or whatever for clearance to come through, and they just need to do it right now. You can accomplish that with a NOTAM. But if they're going to build a new building, a new tower, new tanks or silos or anything else, they need to get advance notification to the FAA, and this needs to be properly evaluated. Now, as an airport, this is a really useful website for you, because if you sign up for this, you can get email notifications of any studies that are taking place in your area. They'll cover a 13-mile radius around you. That way, if anybody wants to build something, they're going to build a new factory or they're going to build a new apartment complex or whatever, you'll get an email ahead of time when this is only just being considered, and it'll say who's building what, where, who you can contact, and you can then voice your opinion if you're concerned about anything. So this is really handy. I get an email of this every single morning. I can look and see what's being built where. I can click on that case. It pulls up all the information on it. Fantastic. So when we're there doing an inspection, what are we looking for? One of the first things we start out with, other than just your approaches, is looking at your physical facility. Your pavement, we want to make sure that your asphalt pavements are free of debris. If they have any cracks, those cracks should be small, not going to affect directional control, and they should be well sealed. There should be no damaged or uneven areas, ruts, or anything like that. Concrete pavements should also be free of debris. They kick out little pop-outs every once in a while. Seal those joints and fix any spalls or any kind of major breaks. Turf surfaces need to be evenly mowed, uniformly mowed, be evenly graded, nice and smooth, and then be free of any animal ruts or burrows, because those impact directional control. And then if you do routine proactive maintenance, that can save you a lot of time and hassle later. You seed regularly, you take care of your wildlife, your gophers and everything else. That'll save you a lot of more substantial repairs later on, especially if you do regular crack sealing. If you seal every year or every other year, that keeps all the ice from spreading those cracks and messing up your paved surfaces. Runway safety areas are really important. Now, a safety area is an overrun area that surrounds your runways. This is there because if something happens to an airplane, they experience an emergency and they go off the side of the runway, we want to make sure that they don't hit anything. They just need to go through a nice even field, roll to a stop, everything's fine, and nobody's hurt, no damage. For that, you need to make sure that there is nothing at all in those runway safety areas. You can't have anything. You can't have roads. You can't have structures. You can't have crops, hay bales, water, anything like that. And the runway safety areas are bigger than some airports realize. This is actually a typical and a fairly small runway safety area. This is 120 feet wide, so 60 feet either side of center line, and sticks 240 feet off either end of the runway. And so this is Cavalier. Harold, you'll recognize that. This is, again, the smaller size runway safety area. If you have a bigger runway, then you may have 150 feet wide and 300 feet off the runway ends. And if you're a commercial airport with a big runway, that could be 1,000 feet off either end and 500 feet wide. So it's a big area. Should be nothing out there. And make sure that you mow it evenly so there's no kind of rough patches where you run into brush. Lighting. Your lighting should be fully operable and in good repair. FAA standards, and most people don't realize the percentage standards, if your runway edge lights have to be 85% operational. If you drop below that, then your lighting system is considered inoperative and you should put out a NOTAM to protect yourself legally. Your runway end lights, the threshold lights, got to have 75% of those operable, so if you lose more than 2 in any set, then system's down. So really make sure to inspect your lights, fix them as often as you can. All lights and signs are required to be frangible because, as we were talking about that safety area, if an airplane goes off the side of the runway, hits a light or a sign, you want that sign to just snap right off. It's designed so that it has a little frangible coupling that's about this high off the ground, 3 inches, and it should just snap right off. You can kick it right over, and should be no more than scrapes to the paint on that airplane. We have some older lighting systems that are not built to be frangible. They're built in the 70s. Before these standards were in place, so they're built on posts or PVC pipes or things like that. So if your airport doesn't have frangible lights, consider a project sometime in the future to get those properly replaced for safety. As far as taxiways are concerned, you can have lighting systems, but a good cheap and low maintenance option is reflectors. If you got a PAPI system, you need to inspect those monthly under FAA standards and then log those standards. That way, if an airplane has an accident, they can look at your maintenance log and you can say, hey, we checked that, 3 weeks ago, it was perfectly aligned, it was fine, there's nothing wrong with that PAPI. Very important to protect yourself as an airport. If you have an airport beacon, it should have a green and white lens. and it should rotate at 6 or 12 rotations per minute depending on size, and then be angled upward slightly at 2 to 10 degrees because you don't want to blast your neighbors. That's not very good for public relations. To help prevent runway incursions, airports should all have mandatory holding position signs at any taxiway that intersects a runway. So it's a red sign, white inscription, looks like a stop sign. It can be internally lit. It can be just simple retroreflective, which is a nice low maintenance option, requires no electricity. And those should be installed in conjunction with holding position markings. Jumping into markings. All paved runways should be painted with markings. There shouldn't be any unmarked runways out there. If you have a paved runway, it needs to have the appropriate markings for its approach type, whether it's a visual, non-precision, or precision. Absolute minimum markings are a designator number and then a center line. Depending on your approach and the size of your runway, you may have to add in threshold stripes. You may have to add in runway aiming points and TDZ markings and threshold bars and all that other stuff. But at a minimum, numbers and center line. Let's see, we've talked about the mandatory holding position markings, which is that image you see on the right there, the yellow kind of ladder and bars, and that's for safety. And then markings should be well painted, as little wear as you can get away with. They should have reflective glass beads, so that way they can be seen really well at night. They should be easily visible from the air, and then most safety-related markings, so that's almost all markings on runways, and that's holding position markings, require black borders. On pavements that are 2 years or more old, but it's usually just smarter just to paint the black borders now when you first put them down, save you time later. For wind direction indicators, we check those out. The standard wind direction indicator is a windsock, either 8 feet or 12 feet long. You can also have T's and tetrahedrons if you wanted supplementals, but those are not considered primary wind direction indicators. If they get faded, turn from bright orange to kind of a pale peach or whatever, replace them. If they get worn, they get shredded. Defunct units, especially like, for example, that wind T there, what you can't see in that picture is a bird's nest and that arm that sticks out. That's not very helpful and that's not very safe. So if you got an unusable one, remove it. And keep an eye out for windsock drainage. You can see that this little windsock has a little beer belly there. What that is that's got a drainage problem and it's filled up with water, it fills up with ice, that adds weight. Windsocks have to be able to rotate in a 3-knot wind and be accurate within 5 degrees. If they don't do that, then you got a problem. And if it's carrying an extra 10 pounds of weight in it, it's not going to have that accuracy that you're required to have. So if you get that little bulge there, make sure that you figure out how to get that drainage fixed, punch a new grommet in it, fix the structure, whatever the case may be. We also take a look at your fuel system, if you have a fuel system. Fuel safety standards are in NFPA 407, Standard for Aircraft Fuel Servicing. You can look at that at nfpa.org. Certain subjects that are covered are there's no fueling within 25 feet of a building. That's NFPA standard. Your system should have a bonding cable to discharge static, prevent static discharges that can then cause fires. Your system should have emergency shutoff, so it should be a button or a switch clearly labeled that's about 50 feet away. You can just smack it, shuts off the fuel pump, and that helps prevent fires or stop fires. Should have the appropriate BC fuel fire extinguishers, and then appropriate safety placards. So it needs to have things like flammable, no smoking, what the tank contents are, any appropriate hazmat diamonds. You got the DOT diamond on the right there, and then the standard color-coded diamond on the bottom. If you're a 139 airport, again, you are covered by FAR Part 139. That's a commercial airport. You get the joy of having several days worth of inspections with a federal inspector, so that's much more time consuming. In addition to everything else that we covered here, they also add like a nighttime lighting inspection. They'll do drills with your firefighting staff and your equipment. They'll ask all kinds of questions, get really in depth. They'll dig through all your records, including personnel training and facility inspections and everything else. So it's much more intensive. Big airport like O'Hare or JFK, it can take a week to even work through that. So appreciate when we show up for 2 or 3 hours. Pavement Condition Index. This is something we do every 3 years. So we have engineers run around, go to every paved airport in the state, look at every single crack, every single little bit of damage on the pavements, and then analyze everything. And we put together this great website. You can find it at aero.nd.gov. That's our main site. Studies, Pavement Condition Index, click the blue link. This is the first page you jump to, so you can see every airport in the state with a paved runway. It's all color-coded, scored 0 to 100. 0 is failed pavement, 100 is absolutely perfect, brand new. You got a bunch of different options here. I'm not going to go through everything, but you can play around with these things for hours and look at every airport in the state. There is, if you click on the network option, it'll show you this whole state level. You can also click on the other options, branch and section, to look at individual portions of airports. You can click on the airport specifically. It takes you right to that airport's page and a breakdown of it. There's a map toggle. There's some advanced info tabs at the top if you want to understand methodologies and get definitions and look at graphs for the whole state. There are 3 options up in the right-hand corner, which you can't read very well here, but it's map, data, and split. That's really handy. You can either look at a map at just your airport, you can look at just a data table, or you can split it in half and look at a hybrid of both. And then there's this cool adjustable data slider on the side. You can grab that little green circle and then drag it, and it'll show how your airport will age over time. Show you how it will naturally degrade, which is pretty slick. So this is the hybrid view. This is Devil's Lake and their breakdown. On the left side, you can pick different sections using drop-down menus. We have a brand new tool that's built in, that green bar at the bottom. You click on that and you can look at your airport and break it down by pavement type, by its use, by its age, by its condition, by the exact distress type. So that's really handy, especially for your engineers. Some other things that are important for you, you can click on any color-coded part of that airport and it'll take you right to that section. You can toggle photos, so it comes with those little photo icons. You can click those and it'll show you a photo that an engineer took when they were evaluating your pavement. There's an inventory tab at the top. That is one of the ones that I like the most. It shows you what each surface is made of, whether it's Portland cement or it's asphalt. You can click on inspection and it'll show you all the different distress types, like this table that's here. Shows you linear feet of any kind of given distresses, or square yards, or everything else. You can display all the photos on the airport, look at charts for your airfield, download PDFs of supporting documents, so you can look at the summary for your airport, or simplified maps. I print off a simplified map for every one of those CIP meetings, so everybody can just look at it real quick, and it's a lot quicker than looking at the more involved website. And then there's the table. There's also a recommended maintenance work costs. You click on that and it'll show you what the engineers analyzed your airport and thought, you're going to need this kind of work in the future, this kind of maintenance, it's going to cost about this much. So that's really good for your planning purposes if you want to know 5 years in the future what that runway rehab might cost you. Some really quick pavement distress examples that are common: joint seal damage on concrete, where you lose the seal between the slabs. That lets ice and sand and stuff in there, and that'll break up your slabs. Corner breaks, faulting, where your slabs get uneven. Shattered slabs. Asphalt, we see lots of linear and transverse cracking. Raveling is the loss of the aggregate material. It gives it a really rough surface and then kicks up lots of FOD. Patching, which is a repair type, but it's actually distress on its own. You have a really bad piece of pavement, you cut it out, you put in a patch, fixes it, makes it better, but it's still not the original pavement. It's still a weak point in it, so it's technically its own distress. And then alligator cracking is named because it looks like an alligator's back, and it's your last step before it basically falls apart. Notices to air emissions, NOTAMs. Airports are required to issue timely notifications to all airmen and anybody in the industry of any kind of unsafe or any condition that might impact their flight. This is normally done through issuing notices to air missions. It was renamed recently to incorporate, in part, drone missions and everything else. If there is a hazardous or some kind of disruptive condition at your airfield and you don't put out a NOTAM for it, that is a liability on you if something happens. So make sure to get those NOTAMs out in a timely manner. Real quick list of some important things: runway closures, cranes near the airfield, somebody might smack into it, damaged pavements that you can't close off. Maybe you only have one taxiway and you can't shut down that taxiway because it'll cripple your airport for weeks. Surface contaminants like snow, ice, and snowbanks. If somebody hits a snowbank and you didn't tell them the snowbank was there, it's on you. Damaged or inoperative signs, active construction maintenance activities on the airfield, inoperative fuel systems. Somebody shows up and there's no gas, that's a problem. And there's advisory circulars and FAA orders that break down all these different things in detail. Make sure that you check up on your airport NOTAMs frequently. Make sure it's just kind of a routine thing that you do. We have some airports that have NOTAMs that they put out and just stay in the system practically in perpetuity, that are not valid anymore. You want to make sure that what you've got published is accurate and it is communicating all the appropriate information. If there's something that is not valid anymore, you don't need it, cancel it out of the system so it doesn't clutter things up. It'll also let you know if, you'll figure out if you need to put something out and there's not a NOTAM out for it. A bunch of different apps and websites you can go to, but this is the FAA site, NOTAM Search. How do you get a NOTAM out there? First, you have to register. So you call Leidos, that's the FAA's NOTAM system contractor. I've got some articles and all your reference packets of some stuff that I wrote about that for the quarterly, so I won't spend too much time on this, but you call Leidos, you get registered ahead of time. They won't let you issue NOTAMs if you're not pre-registered. You can file online through either eNOTAM 2 or NOTAM Manager. That's computer-based, that's pretty easy. But you can also go by phone. So if you don't have computer access, you're not sure how to write something up, you can call the Leidos outage line directly, talk to a briefer, explain what your problem is, and they'll write a NOTAM for you. It's usually a good habit to get into it that if you have a really important, say, ILS-related NOTAM, that you refresh it periodically. NOTAM lists can get really long, especially at the commercials, and really important NOTAMs can slowly work their way down the list. This is Bismarck's NOTAMs just for Wednesday during that snowstorm. I looked at O'Hare's the same day. They have 3 pages worth of this, so anything that's critical is going to wind up way at the bottom. If they're flying through multiple airports, getting their NOTAM briefing for all these different airports, you're not going to find anything important. So if you have a NOTAM that you think is really important, issue it, reissue it periodically, and it'll keep kicking it up to the top of that list. Wildlife. Wildlife is a big hazard. Any animal, doesn't matter how big it is or how many there are, they're all dangerous to aircraft. The size and the numbers merely determine their degree of danger. So, even a little bird, if it hits a plane in flight, it hits with the force of a major league fastball, and it can cause a lot of damage. If you have something big like an elk or a moose, you hit that, that's like having a car crash. And there are incidents where that has happened. So it's really important to try to deal with wildlife if you can. Few really quick statistics. There have been 17,000 recorded collisions just in 2019. There's been 250,000 since 1990. There have been almost 300 people killed since 1998 around the world. $700 million in damage to aircraft in the U.S. every year alone. 61% of wildlife strikes occur during the landing phase and 36% during the takeoff phase for aircraft. Leaves only 3% en route. That means that the highest probability of somebody hitting an animal is in your airspace right around your airport. So you have a role and responsibility to try to mitigate those hazards. What is a strike? A few quick things. Somebody sees it, whether it's a pilot or somebody on the ground. Pilot or mechanic's doing a walk around and they find that there's a dent with a blood smear on it, that's a strike. If you as an airport operator find that there's wildlife remains within 250 feet of a runway center line and you can't immediately tell it was something different, that's a strike. I used to work near the Atlantic coast, and we used to sometimes find fish on our runways. That's obviously not a strike. We had ospreys that would pick up fish and then get scared and drop them on the runways. And then if no physical contact occurred, but an airplane had to dodge, they had to abort a landing, that is technically a strike. No harm was done, animal's fine, aircraft is fine, crew is fine, but it still impacted the aircraft's flight. That is a strike. So how do you report those strikes? There's a lot of stigma that airports feel about reporting strikes, as though they're failing somehow. That is not the case. Reporting a strike actually shows that you're dedicated to aircraft safety, and it's really important. There are airports that exist that are in migration corridors and that are really active, and you might have hundreds of strikes every year. So your one little strike from your airport that you might get once a year, that's not a big deal. It also helps wildlife biologists to understand wildlife behaviors and understand how to deal with these animals. Anybody can report a strike. You can go to wildlife.faa.gov to file that, or you can use the forms that are in the Aeronautical Information Manual or the Advisory Circular on Strikes. If there's some data that you don't know, there's a bunch of fields. Don't worry about leaving things blank. Fill in what you know, leave everything else. Try to be as accurate as you can when you're reporting these strikes, but given how violent a lot of strikes are, there might not be a lot to try to figure out what species it was. So there's a bunch of different resources. There's Merlin Bird ID for your phone. There's Audubon Society Field Guides. Cornell has an exceptional bird website. Your University Extension Office might be really good. If you know it's a bird but can't figure it out, you can actually send a sample of those feathers or blood sample to the Smithsonian's Bird ID lab. That's really handy. You don't have to do that, but they can then professionally analyze it and figure out exactly what the species was. And then if you do have a strike, make sure that you document it well. Take photos of the animal, take photos of the damage, keep a copy of the report. That way if any questions come up, you can verify, especially if, say, there's an issue with somebody incorrectly ID'd a species, thought it was a highly endangered species, and it set off alarm bells at the government level. You can pull out the photo and they can say, oh no, that was actually, something that's much less critical. So wildlife are drawn to areas of the airport that have shelter, food, places to rest. That's wetlands, ditches, buildings, all sorts of stuff like that. Even wet runways can attract seagulls. Commercial airports are required to have a wildlife hazard management plan, and we have a few GAs that do that as well. It's a plan that helps mitigate hazards on the airport and help control species. There's a couple different methods you can use. There's passive mitigation and active. Passive, you're trying to make the airport less appealing. A good way that you can do that for all airports is to cut your grass to between 6 and 14 inches. That's too deep to forage, but it's too shallow to be really good shelter. It's a pain to try to maintain it at that level, and I know that's not practical to do that at a lot of airports, but do your best. Remove any FOD. You can use visual deterrents like decoys, but move them constantly because they'll figure out that owl's made of plastic pretty quick. You can install deterrents like spikes or netting. Fencing is a really good option for keeping out ground species. And you can fill in wetlands, but if you're a NIPIUS airport, you got to make sure you have all the appropriate environmental clearances. You can't just run out there with a backhoe and start filling things in. That's going to cause a lot of problems that you don't want to deal with. And then active mitigation, you're actively trying to drive species away. You have pyrotechnics, propane cannons, vehicle harassment. You can trap and relocate species or do lethal takes, but be aware that there's a lot of protected species. Almost every bird species is protected, so don't just go shooting things because that comes with jail time and fines. Winding down here, almost done. Runway incursions are one of the greatest safety threats to airports. I'm not going to read the definition, but it's any time that there's something on the airport at a time when it shouldn't be, whether that's an airplane, whether that's a car. If air traffic control told an airplane to go somewhere that it shouldn't, that's also an incursion. We've had occurrences around the state where airports have found signs of unauthorized vehicles, whether it's tire tracks doing donuts on the ends of the runway, holes punched through the fence. So we try to do everything we can to try to prevent runway incursions. It's not only a direct danger to aircraft, especially since you have lots of people that if they're unauthorized, they don't know how to deal with airplanes, how to communicate with them, they'll probably put themselves or the plane in a dangerous situation. But also, your airport is, in most circumstances, not designed to handle the weight of large vehicles. So we have had occurrences of dump trucks and tractor trailers driving on surfaces that were built for aircraft that are a fraction of their size. You can see right there, that was an aging strip of, aging piece of taxiway, but a tractor trailer backed up on that and completely wrecked it. So you don't want that at your airfield. Commercial airports are required by FAA and TSA to put in fences and access controls. Some GA airports have put in wildlife fences that serve the same purposes. Now, as a small GA airport, you might find that to be too expensive. It's really expensive to put in really good fencing. And it's also can be off-putting. You know, airports have expressed that they don't want to seem unwelcoming. But you can put in simple and efficient measures in strategic locations to just minimize the chance of unauthorized vehicles. You can put in smooth wire fencing. You can put little simple swing arm gates at main access points. One of the cheapest and simplest things that I've seen is you can put lines of curb stops and then some vertical bollards. It's not off-putting, but it makes it so if you're going to drive through in a vehicle, you're probably going to knock your mirrors off, and it's enough to keep people out. So that's a pretty good one. Installation of security cameras can help you as an airport operator too, because not only can you catch unauthorized people on camera, but it also provides you with some video footage in the event that you have to investigate, say, a vandalism or an accident or something on your airport. So that's the extent of my section. I will now turn it over to Grant.
All right, thanks again, Adam. Thanks to everybody for coming out once again. My name is Grant Irwin. I'm the new airport planner with the Aeronautics Commission here, covering the western half of North Dakota. I understand being the last speaker and everything, I'm going to try to keep things as simple as I can and very high level and get us out of here. So I'm going to use my time today to talk about our AWOS and WindSock programs. I'm going to talk about based aircraft and kind of introduce the FAA's based aircraft site. Talk about IFEs, or independent fee estimates, engineering selections that happen, and then I'll finish off just by highlighting the ACRP studies. So I'm going to jump right into it, starting with the AWOS program. This was created by the Aeronautics to provide financial assistance and help out for the regular maintenance that occurs, as well as keeping those systems hooked up to the NADEN network. And that NADEN network is really what connects your AWOS to basically everything that can use the internet. So ForeFlight, Garmin Pilot apps, connects to flight service, the Lockheed Martin site for all the weather briefings and everything. That's what hooks your system up to the internet, and that's how it all gets that information. So in the state, we have 36 AWOS systems. We have 2 at the Air Force bases. We have 8 at the commercial airports. And then for this program, the one that we have, We cover the 26 that are at the GA airports. So basically we've got two schedules for the regular maintenance. The first choice you have is you can have Aeronautics fund 100% of all that maintenance, and that includes 3 airport inspections. And how we do that is we utilize the lowest qualified bidder. So I've got the information up on the right side there, who is our current contract. That's RSI, Remote Systems Integration. And Tom Nichols is the contact for that. For those of you that may not know, I've got this information up there. Feel free to write that down if you need it. The second option that's available is the airports can go out and contact their own contractor, and then you can provide those invoices for the cost of maintenance and everything to the state, and then we can reimburse you. I know we reimburse up to $2,385 a year for the maintenance costs, and then $420 a year for those need and connection services. As for any unscheduled maintenance that happens, whether it's parts breaking down or just the whole system down, those, for all the cost of the parts and labor that might need to happen, that is the responsibility of the airport. So what happens is you guys can reach out to that contractor, reach out to Tom, he'll get out to the airport, he'll figure out what needs to happen, and once he's got the problem figured out, he submits those costs to both us at the Aeronautics and to you at the airport. And then once that happens, we can have some discussions and we can kind of decide to, when the work needs to happen. If it's an urgent problem that needs to get fixed right away, get that AWAS back up and running, or if it's something a little smaller and it can wait until that next round of inspections and be fixed then. Once that's all done, the airports are definitely encouraged to apply for reimbursement through our state grant process, and that'll happen during our normal schedule, and then we take those applications and forward them up to the commission. So I also wanted to just highlight some of the problem areas that we've been made aware of recently. The first one being vegetation around the AWAS systems. The sensors in all of the systems are very highly sensitive, and the plant growth can interfere without much work at all. So what the recommendation is for us, we ask that the grass and the plants be cut down to about 10 inches within a 100-foot radius around that system. So that top picture on the right, you can see that's not what we want. All that tall grass, all that bushes, that is not what we want. The bottom picture, the grass is cut around the outside, and then within that enclosure itself, all of the vegetation is cleared. That's what we want to see. The second problem is having access to the AWAS systems. We would like to see each AWAS system with some sort of access. I mean, it's just got to be a simple road. Our goal here is to minimize costs, so single lane, just made of dirt or gravel, just a way to effectively get to that AWAS system, like for Tom when he needs to go out and do those inspections. Finally, one of the newer issues we've been seeing is you've probably seen an email from either Adam or myself referencing the north reference markers for the AWAS systems. These are going to be looked at pretty heavily by the FAA in the future, and so we need to make sure those are in. And so there are a few requirements that I've got. It has to be surveyed. It has to be a permanent fixture in the ground. Most commonly they use a cement marker. It has to be inspected annually. And also, if it's missing or if it needs replacement, it has to have another survey done to make sure that that data is accurate and in the right spot. So if that happens, and if you go out and discover that your marker is missing, anything you need to do, whether it's a survey, all that work, that is also eligible for state assistance as well. So that kind of finishes up the AWAS program. I'm going to talk next about the WINSOC just a little bit. Aeronautics provides public airports with one WINSOC per calendar year, one for each airport. We have 8-foot and we have 12-foot options available. And as Adam said, if you see that they're starting to deteriorate, you can reach out to us, we'll get you one. If we're coming to your airport on an inspection, we usually like to have them with us, so we'll just hand you a form there if you like it. You can fill it out, boom, we got a WINSOC right there for you. If not, if you're not getting inspected, you can find the forms on our website, the aero.nd.gov. All you got to do is print it out, fill it up, send it back in to ndaero@nd.gov, and we will get those WINSOCs mailed right to you. So that's that. That one's a lot more simple. So moving on, I'm going to start talking about based aircraft, but first I want to highlight the NIPIAS classifications. And the NIPIAS is really the most important part of why all those based aircraft numbers matter. And so in North Dakota, for the GA NIPIAS classifications, as you can see on the right, it starts out national, and then regional below that, local, basic, and then at the very bottom is unclassified. So here in North Dakota, we have no national or regional airports on the general aviation side. We have 21 locals, we have 25 basics, and we do have one unclassified airport. And what that unclassified means is if you drop below the requirements, let's say you are in the NIPIAS and then you drop below, the FAA updates that system the NIPIAS every 2 years. And so if you no longer meet those requirements, you drop out, you lose all your federal funding. And so that's why this based aircraft is so important. And the commercials I can highlight as well, we've got one that's a small hub, that's Fargo. We've got 6 non-hub primaries, and we have 1 non-primary. So, the FAA requires each airport to have at least 10 based aircraft to be included in the NIPIAS. And so there are a few exceptions that we've seen for 9, depending on the location, depending on the services offered. A very few for 8, but they really are strict on that 10 minimum. And so the next NIPIAS update from the FAA is occurring very soon at the end of 2023 here. So we are recommending that you have updated, accurate data for your based aircraft probably by October, because you'd like a few months to make sure that data is good and accurate, and if any problems arise, that gives you a little bit of wiggle room to get that done before that update occurs. Again, as I said, it's important for those requirements. If you've got the low numbers, if you've got that inaccurate data, that means 2 years of lost funding. If you drop below 9 and the FAA comes out and says you're now unclassified, let's say you get 10, back up to 10 within 2-3 months, you're out of luck until the next update comes. So that's 2 years of lost funding, and that includes any carryover you might have built up. If you've got a few years of carryover, you lose that NIPIAS classification. Once you regain that classification back in 2 years, you're starting right at $0. So one kind of area I also wanted to highlight was kind of a red flag area that we've noticed recently. If you've got a lot of aircraft, let's say you've got 13, 14 aircraft, but one aircraft owner has 6 of those planes. Well, what's going to happen if he decides he's getting sick of all the snow, he decides to move south, he takes all 6 of those airplanes with him, and now you're down to 8, 7 aircraft, and that can really make a red flag. So we really like to see a lot of diversity among aircraft owners on your airports. As for the FAA website itself, I've got kind of a screenshot on the right of what you'll see if you go to www.basedaircraft.com. That's the official site, and we really recommend going in there at least once per year, even just to double check your data. If, let's say, nothing new happens, it's pretty slow, you get the same amount of airports, just go in and make sure that the data is still accurate. And the really big thing we want to highlight here is that nice big green button. That's the button you have to click to make sure that you've got your aircraft data confirmed. The FAA does monitor this information. If they see that airports haven't been confirming that data for a few years, they will start digging through each tail number, and they will start to double check and make sure, okay, we're going to kind of do this for them. So then they'll be watching you a little closer. As for some of the requirements for a based aircraft, the FAA has 3 requirements. 1, it has to be registered, has to have a tail number registered with the FAA. 2, it has to be an airworthy aircraft. And 3, this is the one where some airports kind of start to get in trouble. It has to be on your airport for a majority of the year, at least 6 full months. One of the situations that happens is we get some of the sprayers that come in, they'll stay for 3 or 4 months, and then airports try to claim that as a based aircraft, and that does not quite work. And so one of the other things I wanted to highlight is some of the conflicts on the site. Let's say there's an aircraft that you go into the system and you put it in the website. If there's another airport that tries to claim that aircraft, the system will null that for both airports. So neither airport is getting credit for that. So that is up to the responsibility of you as the airport to make sure that your aircraft are actually counting in your system. And if you find one of those aircraft that's having some issues and someone else is trying to claim it, then you can reach out to that owner and say, hey, just wanted to make sure you're actually here, you're with us. If you know that, then obviously you know you've got it. So then it's up to you to reach out to that other airport, because it's just not beneficial for either one. So that's definitely something that we'd like to get figured out. So the next topic I'm moving on to, independent fee estimates. I've also heard them called independent fee reviews quite often. So for those of you that are in the NIPIAS airports, these independent fee estimates, they are required for any project that's over $100,000. What the independent fee estimate is exactly, it's a way for you as the airport to make sure you're getting fair costs for your projects and to make sure that everything is accurate as well. It's a cost estimate that's provided by an independent contractor, and so we recommend you probably use a contractor that usually hasn't been involved if you're in your engineering selection. And we really, really do encourage this to be done by the airport, not the engineer. This is a great tool for you to make sure that you're being treated fairly, and so this is something that we really think should be covered mostly by the airport. So how does it work? I'll just kind of lay out the steps for you. Step 1 is getting a scope of services for your project. This is, again, one of the areas that the airport should definitely be heavily involved in, because what is on that scope of services, that is the work that's going to be done. So you need to be involved with that, and we really want you to make sure that you're getting exactly what you want out of this project. Make sure you have this scope approved by the FAA before you go for the IFE as well. If you got the scope together, you think you've got a good handle on the project, you reach out, you get this IFE, and then you bring it to the FAA and they say they've got some changes for you, they make some recommendations. Well, that IFE is no longer going to be eligible because now the project has changed, so you're going to have to do it all again. So make sure you've gotten an approved scope by the FAA before you reach out for this IFE. Step 2, once you've got that scope all done, you know what's going to happen, is reaching out and contacting those qualified firms. You want to get quotes. We usually recommend at least 3 firms, and then from there you can kind of pick the lowest qualified firm to get you your IFE. Once you've got your firm picked, send them all the information. You send them that scope of services. You send them a spreadsheet so they can fill out all their costs and get you the information for it. And then also remember to follow up with them. We want you to make sure that this firm knows what they're talking about. Make sure they understand, answer any questions they might have about the scope. Make sure they know about it so they can get you the most accurate cost for their IFE. Once they've got that, they'll send you their cost, and then you can compare. We recommend you reach out to your firm after you've got the IFE in hand, and so then you can take what your engineer is recommending, you can take that IFE and you compare costs. So the fee from your engineer should be no higher than 10% of that IFE. If it is, then it's time to take a closer look. You know, what's the discrepancies going on? Maybe someone just misinterpreted one of the parts of the scope, so you reach back out to that independent firm, and they said, oh yeah, that's right, I didn't quite realize this was happening. The cost should be a little closer to here, gets you closer to that number. You can negotiate as needed and make sure you've got everybody on the same page. So that's it for the IFEs. Last main topic I'm going to talk about here is the engineering selections. Again, this is a little more important for the nippiest airports. FAA says that an engineering selection happens once every 5 years at least. If you've got issues, if things are changing, you know, not quite happy with the work done, then the engineering selection can definitely happen a little more often. But at least every 5 years is the minimum. We use the request for qualification method for those engineering selections. This means that you're basically only going off the services that are offered and the qualifications of those firms. Costs are not discussed when you're performing these selections. And then after that, we can work with us as well to set up those deadlines. We usually recommend every year that if you're going to do an engineering selection, usually begin in about February, and then have the announcements after that, moving on to getting that information out there, and then have the proposals from the firms due to you by about mid-April, and then have your selection by early summer. And the reason we recommend that is that way you can have your engineer, you can get settled with them, you can sit down, you can work through that CIP, and then when those CIP meetings come that fall, you'll be set and ready to go with your new engineer for the next year and the next projects. So how does this work? I've got the steps laid out as well. The first thing you're going to want to do is develop a 5-year capital improvement plan, like Adam mentioned. You'll want to have at least the project names, some broad scopes, the estimated years that those projects will be done, the services required, and the estimated costs. Once you've got all those projects listed, you've got that CIP ready to go. Step 2 is getting your selection board all together, and you should have at least 3 knowledgeable persons. We definitely recommend having 5. It doesn't necessarily have to be anybody that's on the airport board. It could be folks from around the airport. If you've got FBO owners or managers, if you've got maintenance shop owners, anybody that you feel has good knowledge about the airport, about the projects that are going to be up and coming, they can definitely be on the board. So once you've got that board selected, make sure they know and are familiar with that 5-year CIP. So then when they're looking into all these firms, they know the projects that are going to be happening. Step 3 is mostly for us, or mostly taken care of by us at Aeronautics. We get all the information together for you. We send out all the announcements, all the advertisements. We provide all the forms, and we will reach out to all the firms and then get all that information to you. Once we do, and once you've got all the firms' information and everything and their proposals, then you move on to step 4, and that's making a selection. So once you have it, each member of your selection board will get their own information and their own proposals. And so we recommend that you open them independently. So you take all that information, take it home for a night or two, read through each firm, figure out what's going to happen, and then you give them all scores. Once you've got them all scored up, you rank your firms, best being number 1, second place being number 2, third number 3, so on. And then, once that happens, then you can come together as a group, discuss your firms, talk about any questions, things you need to do, and then you find that best overall firm. So you use golf scores. The most number 1s added up will give you your lowest ranked firm, giving you the best option, and then you've got your firm. So that was kind of the last topic for me. I just wanted to end by highlighting the ACRP studies. And those are put on, the ACRP was a program created by the Transportation Research Board. They developed this program to research through problems seen in the aviation industry, come up with solutions, and then they publish those as researches and studies. So if you go to this website I have up here, www.trb.org, this is where you'll be able to find all of these studies. I've got a screenshot up here as well. This is the page you should see, that TRB site, and that's the ACRP right there. And so what happens is they're all free for the public. You can register and get yourself an account on that website for free, and then you can download any of the PDFs you can find. They also have options available for hard copy purchases as well. And they have there's nothing that says that you're required to read through these or look through any of them, but they're just a lot of great information with all these studies. I've got a few recommended up on here, as well as in the sheet in your packets as well. Some of the advisory circulars from the FAA, but we've also included a few of the ACRP studies as well. And so you can kind of see some of the options they offer. They've got guidebook for managing airports. They've got marketing guidebooks. They have quite a few on wildlife issues. One of the newer ones that just came out was the airport insurance requirements. And so it's a lot of great information for everybody to read, and we just recommend that you look into those. And with that was all I have. I'll turn it back over to Kyle to finish her up.
All right, we're about finished here. I really appreciate your patience. Like I said at the beginning, we did have a lot of information we wanted to cover with you here. And again, just a reminder, please visit our aeronautics website, ndaero.nd.gov, to find more information. And again, a reminder, stop by our booth. We have the new airport directory. Please take those with you so you can have those available for all the pilots back at your local airport. We also have economic impact information, education brochures, passport booklets. Please stop by to grab that information. And the last thing that I did want to announce is that we have partnered with NASAO, that's the National Association of State Aviation Officials, on an aviation training program. So every state is a member of this organization that represents all the states. And what this group did was develop these really professional educational modules. And they're just absolutely excellent. There's over 30 of them that are available. They cover all topics from aviation planning, land acquisition, engineering, FAA design standards, airport pavement management, a whole assortment of subjects. And so what we've recently done is we're going to partner with them to provide these professional modules to all of our airports throughout the state. And so we'll be in touch with you in the near future, but you're going to eventually get a login for you and your board members and staff members where you can log in at your leisure. If you want to learn more about airport layout plans, go ahead, watch that 30 to 40 minute video, and 3 weeks go by and you want to watch a video on working with your airport engineer and things you need to know, watch that module. So this is something new that we're going to be rolling out here in the near future. I want to make you aware of it. We're really excited to provide you with more information to become more empowered, better educated about how to be a successful airport at the local level, because we really do believe at the Aeronautics Commission that it truly does begin at the local level. If we can build up our airports and our airport authorities to take on a leadership role and to really understand what that role is and to pursue greatness at that local level, eventually that's going to translate into an even better place for all of our airports and all of our pilots and the entire aviation environment for the state of North Dakota. And so again, I want to thank all of you for being here today and taking time out of your day to learn more about what it takes to be a successful airport. Like I said, I know it's one of the highest paid positions in your community, being a volunteer airport board member. And I just truly, really appreciate the time that you take to volunteer and to make aviation important in your community. And so in closing, again, this information isn't here to overwhelm. We're here to help, not just us at the Aeronautics Commission. The FAA Airport District Office is there as well. And so, again, feel free to reach out to us anytime. We'd love to sit down with you and talk about any of these subjects to just further help you help aviation throughout the state of North Dakota. All right. Thank you so much, everybody.